And now let me go ahead and uh, talk about our presenter. Ang Jandak is a marketing professional, and I think she's going on 19 years at this point. She's been a regular presenter for SCORE Buffalo, and she is also a co-mentor as a subject matter expert. She's adamant about creating and streamlining processes so that people can focus on people, not paperwork. Again, Ange is a frequent presenter for us. We're very pleased to be able to have her make this presentation tonight. Ange, we appreciate your willingness to continue to share your knowledge and experience. At this point, the microphone and the controls are yours. But please go ahead.
Thank you, Ted. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be able to present this presentation to you. My goal is to be able to use the presentation to establish the core foundation and the core concepts, and then leave time open at the end so we can talk about specific use cases and any sort of question that's geared towards your specific business. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. If I can, I'll answer them during, but otherwise I will answer them at the end in the order that they are received. So all of that being established, let's go into social media strategies that deliver results. Brief agenda, we're going to go over what we said in the ad, building an audience, creating content, the logistics of creating and posting content, how we look at reporting, and then we'll have time for the Q&A afterwards. So why is social media important? I think everybody knows they're supposed to do it, but they don't necessarily know why. And there's two reasons: to connect with your current audience and to reach a new audience. That's it. Everything else is just, features or distractions. Those are your two reasons. I do want to call out social media is not a website, for a long list of reasons. But basically, you can't control social media. If somebody wanted to change an algorithm, it could completely disrupt your business. Somebody could close down your account on Instagram. And if your entire business was built around that, you wouldn't have access to it anymore. So remember, social media is an addendum to your business. It's to help support it, but your entire structure should not be based only in social media. Now, let's talk about building an audience. So whenever we're talking about business, I always bring it back to user experience. And that means that you have to understand your user base. You have to understand your audience. Who are you speaking to? What do they care about? Not just in relationship to you and your business product or service, but in general in their lives, what's important to them, and where do they get their information? Having this sort of information will give you a general idea about who they are as people, which will help you break down and understand content that is relevant for them, as well as how to speak to them and what platforms they spend time on. Knowing your user journey when somebody is working with you, what does that process look like? Is it something that they do once and done? Is it a longer process where they have a couple of meetings before they sign any paperwork? Hello, my darling. I love you. What does that process look like? And you need to understand how many stages there are. What is their barrier? What are they thinking about at each stage? And how can you make them feel appreciated? Also understand, what is their relationship to you? Anybody who is connected to your business, has any sort of engagement with your business, falls into one of these categories. They're an ambassador, where they love you so much they're actively telling other people about you. They're doing your marketing for you. We love these people. However, they are very few and far between. Fans are people who, they love to talk about you when you come up, but they don't go out of their way to do it. Then you have your general users, customers, and clients. looky-loos, people who come and visit, but they don't actually do anything actionable, strangers, people who have no idea who you are or what you do, and also active haters. Not that we're planning on these, but I want everyone to understand that social media is not a zero-sum game. If you make a stand or say something, there might be people who take offense to that, and there is negative consequences that can come with social media, and it's something to be very aware of. So the big thing with audiences when it comes to small businesses, especially, is we feel like we've tapped out on all the potential customers in your space. You go to all the networking events, you come to SCORE, you participate in all the industry best practices, but you just keep saying the same faces over and over. You feel your market might be too saturated. You have no idea where you can go to get clients that aren't being serviced by your competitors. So outside of leaning into your niche, which isn't always applicable, what are you supposed to do? So you haven't actually utilized everything. You're just obstructing yourself. And I'm going to explain that with this wonderful animation. How are we obstructing ourselves? We assume everyone is like us. If you don't get any information to the contrary, you're going to assume that the people who come to you for goods and services, they value the same things that you do. They're exactly the same person you are. They have the same family structure. They have a similar background. They have similar interests. And that's not always true. We have a tendency to work in the same circles over and over again, where, if we're in an industry, we know everybody in that industry. We go to the same events. Our kids attend the same schools. We just have the same circles that we are constantly reliving in. Even in social media, we are just going to the same watering holes, so to speak, to get the same information and seeing the same people over and over again. And we use in-speak and jargon that makes it difficult to attract people who aren't already a part of the conversation. There's a lot of implied knowledge or institutionalized knowledge when we're talking about goods or services that, especially, there might be a little bit of an educational bent to, or we have to educate the consumer as to why it's important. And it's one of those, if you know, you know, and if you don't, you don't. And we have to understand that not everybody understands or knows everything that we do. And so when we realize we're doing these things, we realize that we're alienating people who are potential customers of ours. And we have to stop that process. And how do we do that? This thinking makes it nearly impossible to find new, untapped potential customers. So you have to think, how do you find people who could potentially have an interest in what you have to offer? And to take a step back, you have to remember, no one sells or buys goods or services. They fulfill needs, often needs that they can't really define themselves. For example, people don't buy a meal prep service like HelloFresh. They fulfill a need to drop the mental load of having to meal plan every day, or they want to save some of the time that they have to spend cooking, or they want to be healthier than eating out every night, or they want to teach their kids to cook in a low stakes atmosphere where they don't have to remember to go shopping and pick up all these things. It's all put together for them. Those are the intangibles that they're buying. It's something that by definition is hard to define. And whenever anybody exchanges money for a good or service, they're looking to fulfill that intangible. And the reason that's important is this concept that I work with on building audiences outside of your standard audience. And it's called annexing audiences. And you start by annexing interest. And that's seeking out an intangible that your core audience has that are currently meeting those needs through a non-competitor. And then you follow that to annexing an audience, which is seeking out an audience who shares similar intangibles to your core audience that are currently meeting those needs through a non-competitor. And I hate when people use big words to make marketing sound complicated or really vague concepts. So I drew a diagram to kind of help with it. So a traditional Venn diagram, you're looking at what you want. Okay, this audience and this audience overlap. I want responsible people who have assets. They're going to buy insurance from me. Whereas a then link, which is how we sort annex interest and annex audiences, starts with, okay, this is who we think is perfect. These are their intangibles. And then what audiences share that intangible? So example, if we follow the responsible path, who is responsible? Parents. What do parents care about? They care about nutrition for their kids. Who else cares about, nutrition? That's generally the interest of the audience is people who are interested in healthy eating. The interest then, all right, what other types of things are people who participate in healthy eating? What are their interests? General wellness. Well, then another audience could be yoga. So that is an audience that isn't necessarily consumed with getting insurance, but you could focus on the intangible interests that your audience has and follow the chain down. And very similarly, someone who has assets, who talk about big toys, ATVs, snowmobiles, jet skis, motorcycles. What do those people, what's an interest that they typically have? They like adrenaline. So the audience they belong to is risk takers, or risk takers have an interest in adventure, which is shared by people who are interested in travel. And the reason that it's important to define these is, again, we have to get outside of the comfort zone of the circles that we're constantly, repetitively participating in. And we want to not necessarily get huge audiences. We want to be the only person that a small group has to think about. And the reason that I included this in Be the Legendary Fish is if somebody talks about a water monster, who does everybody think about? I'm going to assume that the majority of the people on this call are American, and yet the majority of us are going to think about the Loch Ness Monster. America actually has a water monster in Lake Champlain. His name is Champy, but nobody thinks about him. Everybody knows about Nessie, even though we aren't connected in any way, shape, or form. None of us have seen Nessie. Nessie is the one that we know about. If somebody says, hey, what's that sea monster again? They come up with Nessie. And the reason that that matters is going outside your core audience exposes you to a new untapped market. Even if someone from that untapped market doesn't hire you directly, they will share you with their friends and family because you are the only insert business here that they know. One of the reasons I bring up insurance is my brother-in-law sells insurance, and he is required by his company to go to multiple networking events every single week. Hi, baby. Here, can you show this to daddy? Thank you. He is required to go to these networking events, multiple every week. And he says, what a waste of time they are, because it's just the same people using, the same tired introduction lines, sharing the same business cards, and it doesn't actually result in any sort of business. So I talked about this concept with him, and he started following it. He started going to axe throwing competitions. He started going to Dungeons and Dragons games. And what was great was he became the only insurance person that those people knew. So if anyone in their circle needed an insurance person, he was the only one there. There was no competitors. He was the only person that they were thinking of. And they already had an in because they had an overlapping or annexed interest. So it's important to understand that while the traffic might not be as large as people who are looking for a specific one thing, the competition is virtually non-existent. So you get to be a big fish, a legendary fish in multiple ponds. So that's the concept behind building your audience. And we're going to come back to that in a minute. And we're going to segue into creating content. It all circles, it's spiderwebbed, it all networks together. So with content, you have to figure out, are you platform appropriate? There is not a business in the world who should participate in every single social media platform. It doesn't work. You should find out the ones that mesh with your audience, and you should stay on those platforms. So here are some: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, Reddit, Discord, Snapchat, YouTube, Pinterest, Twitter. I'm not going to call it that other name. Twitch and Google Business, which a lot of people consider an SEO, which it is, but also there is the ability to post on Google, which I think everybody should be utilizing this anyway, but most people don't consider Google a social media, even though it technically is, because you have the ability to do post and update on there, which is why it has an asterisk. But, you know, consider which one of these fit your user base and fit your voice, your brand voice. They are all very, very different. LinkedIn and TikTok both have business audiences, but they're very different in the way that they create content, the way that they present it, and the audiences that they're pursuing. So, you know, all of these have benefits. They also all have drawbacks, and it's really important to understand your user base to know which one of these platforms is appropriate for you. It's important to remember consistency. And there's a lot of confusion about brand voice and brand tone. Brand voice is tied to your brand. It is always the same. Brand tone is something that can shift depending on the platform or the instance that it's being utilized in. And, you know, way back when, we all heard about how Wendy's on Twitter was really caustic and snarky, and it was so different from the kind of stodgy idea that we had for Wendy's that was built on quality. But I found a great example of this, which is great, not only because it gives us a lot of examples, but also we can access the brand guide directly and see how they explain it. And that is Duolingo. Now, for those who don't know, Duolingo is a free app that you can pay to upgrade, but it teaches you languages. And it's kind of become a meme where the little owl mascot is incredibly pushy if you don't participate in Duolingo that day. And it kind of becomes about how he is chasing you down and threatening you. And instead of being outraged and appalled, in some instances, Duolingo leans in heavily to this impression of their company. But again, it always has to be appropriate. And so if we look here, we can see Duolingo, which if you click here, as well as in the resources, I have linked to their direct brand guide. So you can see how they break down their brand voice and their brand tone. But their voice is expressive, where they use simple words and phrases to convey big feelings. Playful, they bring creativity to the conversation. Embracing whoever you are, we're your biggest cheerleader. And worldly, we're interested and knowledgeable, and we have a broad worldview. Now, that is their voice. No matter what tone they take, no matter what platform they're on, that voice will always be consistent. And you can see here, I have a screenshot from their website, I have a screenshot from their Facebook, and I have a screenshot from their TikTok. And on their website, you know, it's very straightforward. This is what you get. It's very simple. It's very approachable. On Facebook, you know, it's very fun. They're talking about a Star Trek language that you can do a course in. But it's very playful, but it's still kind of restrained, as opposed to on TikTok, where you can read for yourself the way that they talk about their brand on TikTok. But across all of those, the voice are consistent. It's just the tone changes based on the platform. Now, another thing about content is you always have to provide value. And that means not talking about yourself constantly. What does your audience need that you can provide? And not just in goods and services, but in general information. There is something called the 80-20 rule. I feel like there are 1,000 80-20 rules that apply to all kinds of different industries and situations. I have 2 of them in this presentation, but essentially 80% of your content should be focused on what you can do for your users, and 20% is what they can do for you. So what can you do for your users? Share lifestyle tips. Again, we understand our user base. We understand what they care about, what's important to them. We can share things that are relevant to their life. We can touch on the intangible things that bring them to us. You know, we know that they're really big about family, we can talk about things that are going on in the family space, and it's still going to be authentic to our brand voice because it's a part of who our client base is and it's a part of who our brand is. We can do reposts from other people in the space or those annexed audiences that we're going to touch on in a minute. We can answer questions that are not just directed to us. We can go out and seek platforms that have these types of questions. So For example, again, if we're going to go back to the insurance thing, we see people when flood season comes around, they're going on legal forums and asking questions about trees falling down because of loose erosion. Hey, did you know that this is a type of policy that you need? And this is the area you're in, and this is what you have to request. You can go out and actively seek those things, not just on things like Quora or Yahoo Answers, mainly because those have been tapped out by people looking to impact their SEO and not actually give authentic, helpful answers. It's essentially people asking questions and then answering themselves for SEO. But there's still plenty of places, where you can go and answer these questions on social media, places like Discord and Reddit and even Instagram, TikTok. Go into the comments and see what people are talking about, and we'll show how to find that in a little bit. Hi, would you like to sit on my lap?
Sit on your lap.
Okay. Say hello to all the nice people. So 20% is focused on what people can do for us, whether that's us talking about a product or a sale that's happening, us asking them to sign up for a newsletter, go to an event, any sort of thing that we're asking them to do. You're welcome, baby. Any sort of thing that we're asking them to do should be minimal. It should not be the majority of our content. Now, what kind of actions are there for social media? Everybody tends to think about posts, but there's a lot that we can do that to be really well-rounded and to get exposed to new audiences and to seem engaged and authentic, you should take advantage of all of them. So there's creating, where you can create post, expiring content, so things like stories or reels, duets and TikTok, you can always add on to what somebody else has created. Think of it kind of like reposting with comments. And then, thank you, that was not helpful. Okay, do blue. Also streaming, whether they call it a live or something else, being actively engaged with your audience in real time. Types of content can be text, images, slideshows, videos, a list article. They used to call them listicles, checklist, infographics, user-generated content. Brands like Ulta have customers upload images with their products. Overtone does it as well, I believe, where then they share that information. It's all user-generated content. They don't have to make it. Their audience is creating it for them, and their audience appreciates being recognized by the brand. And so utilizing user-generated content in your own content can be really beneficial for you on multiple fronts. In addition to creating content, you can also engage, and engaging is things like commenting, reposting, liking, or reacting with emojis. And you should engage with your users. You should engage with competitors, and you can engage with annexed audiences and annexed interests. So content dues. You are not helping. So you want to make sure that it is friendly for work, nap, class, kids, and subways. That means nothing that requires audio, or something that's super loud or flashing, something that is not appropriate, that might have foul language in a place where someone is not expecting it. You want to make sure that you have captioning where possible, and you want to set expectations. If you say, hey, sound is important for this, turn on the sound, put that in a sticker or something like that on your content. You want to focus on the consistency, not the frequency. So one of the things that people used to say is you have to post every day. It doesn't matter if it's good, you just have to make sure that you're posting every day. And that is not true. There are a lot of fantastic content creators who post very, very rarely, but they try to be consistent when they do it. Things like Kurzigstat, the YouTube channel that does these amazing videos that they try to do at least once a week or sometimes once a month, but they announce when it's going to be less. There's a lot of creators on LinkedIn who, post maybe once or twice a week, but they don't disappear for months on end. They don't do the whole burnout thing where they post every day for 2 weeks and they don't show up for a year. Being consistent so that your audience knows what to expect from you, that's what matters. And you want to make sure that whenever you're taking them off site or directing them somewhere, you're continuing the conversation. There's nothing more frustrating when clicking on a link in social media than just being dumped on a page that you have no idea where you're supposed to go. If I'm talking about a new product and you just take me to your homepage, I don't know where I'm supposed to go. It's a frustrating user experience. It's already creating a very subconscious negative reaction to your product, your good, your service, your brand. So if you're going to say, hey, we want to introduce this new product, tell us what you think of it. Take them to the product page. Even better, take them to a specific landing page that has a brief overview of the product, a video about it, and then a form to say, tell us what you think. That makes them feel valued. That makes them feel that it's actually planned for them and you're not expecting them to do lion's share of the workload, because you're already making it really simple for them to see what's expected of them and do what you're asking. You're not making them do extra work to help you out, because everybody hates that, right? If somebody asks us for help and then they make it really complicated and difficult for us to help them, it's much easier to be willing to help and want to help if somebody makes it easier on us. So when there are do's, there are don'ts. Don't aim for viral. People are constantly saying, I want something to go viral, or they're copying what worked for other people to go viral. And the thing is, viral is a perfect storm of a lot of things that you cannot control. For all the companies that say that they make viral content, they have hundreds, if not thousands, of concepts that haven't taken off. They just don't talk about them. They only talk about the things that did take off and that do go viral. So don't try to go viral. Just be authentic to who you are and who your audience is. And if it happens, it happens. But there's so many things that are out of your control. Don't put that burden on yourself to try and do that. Again, don't copy what worked for others. Lots of times people see somebody had success with something. They want to copy the success and they don't understand the reasons why the competitor or whoever did something. They don't understand the underlying structure of it. They just see the results, and all they know is they want the results, and they think if they do the exact same thing, they'll get the same results. And that's not true. You have to have a reason behind doing something so you can build your content around it so that it's successful for you. Don't overproduce. Big thing in social media for a while was people doing like cinema worthy content. And while there are still some situations where that's true, for the most part, people think it's way more authentic to have something that's quick and dirty that can be made from your phone, as opposed to something that's cinema quality. They don't want something to feel too polished. It feels like if you have the money and time to polish something up, you're trying to pull one over on them. And in a world where we're advertised to 85% of our waking hours, people get really quick at sussing out what they think is something that's trying to be sold to them. And so being authentic, saying this is who I am, it's not overproduced. I obviously did this on my phone, or I did it on Canva or something. People are going to be a lot more receptive of that. Also, don't leave anyone hanging. We spoke to a little bit before where we talked about continuing the conversation. If you start a concept, if you start a promotion, if you tell someone, stay tuned for this, follow up with it. I know that sounds really simple and straightforward, but a lot of companies don't do that. They say, oh, I didn't get the engagement I wanted on this, forget this. And it creates a really negative connotation for your brand, and it makes people tune out of your social media, and it hurts your social capital. Something that comes up a lot whenever we talk about social media is influencers. And the thing with influencers, big influencers especially, I'm not a fan. They have essentially given away their credibility for money, and good on them for finding a way to make a living. But the pendulum has swung the other way, and people now do not trust big influencers who say, oh, I use this product. I don't believe you because I know that they gave you $500,000 to tell people that you use it. That being said, Micro influencers are still a consideration and can be really beneficial with your business. A micro influencer on Instagram is someone who has between 10 to 50,000 followers. On YouTube, they're getting 10 to 25,000 views per video. Typically, people who are in this space is someone who has a small but loyal group of followers. They usually have a much higher standard for what they'll promote in the first place. They'll turn down opportunities if they don't feel it's a good fit. It needs to be something that they actually use or believe in. There's a much higher trust level, and they don't cost as much to work with as the bigger names. And the reason I bring this up, I don't want you to be throwing money at influencers. I don't want you to be throwing money at ads. I don't talk about ads in this space at all. I feel that you have to get the rest of your house in order before you're considering spending money on ads. You have to get these foundational elements right. But I think that if there is someone you would eventually like to work with, someone that you think is a good fit for what you have to offer, reaching out to them and getting involved in their social media, commenting on their posts, seeing who their followers are and what they engage with, that's really beneficial for you, and it doesn't cost you any money. And if you do get to the point where you want to get into a partnership with them, you're already established and you have a higher level of trust than someone who just came in out of nowhere. So I do think it's important, if you see somebody you would maybe like to work with at one point, make sure that you're being active in their social media and being involved in their communities. So how do you make content? There are a large array of content designers, things that will just, you have templates set up and you say, drop in some photos, drop in some text, and you can push it out. I have a list of them here. They're also in the resources page at the end of the presentation. All of these have some level of free. Some of them have paid upgrades. Some of them are completely free. Some of them, like Figma is free, but it's typically used for websites. But there are add-ons or templates that you can get that will work specifically for social media, and they'll have preset layouts for all of your social media needs. So these are great. You can create all kinds of content on them: video content, image content, text content. You can do slideshows, all kinds of things with these designers. So all of them have different features. It's important to look at them and see what works best for you. But like I said, these are free. You don't have to invest a lot of money getting involved in content. So let's talk about logistics and how we are supposed to take all this time away from building our business to get involved in social media, which is a full-time job. How are we supposed to do that? So the 80-20 rule part 2, I told you there were 2 of them in here. 80% of your content should be planned and scheduled ahead of time, and 20% should be adaptive content. So things that are happening in the moment, trends, any sort of responses to what other people are talking about should be more about 20% of your content. So I am a huge fan of automation. I think that if you can set aside 1 day a month to plan out your 80% of content and schedule it so you don't have to think about it anymore, do it, so you can focus on the rest of your business. So there are all kinds of ways to schedule your content to post automatically. Most of the platforms now have opportunities where you can set something to post later. That said, you have to do it manually, one by one. It takes a little bit more time, and it's different for every single platform. There are other opportunities, other platforms where you can set it up in a much more visually friendly way. Some of them are free, some of them are paid. I have a list of them here: Buffer, Plannable, CoSchedule, Loomly, OneUp. There are also things like Hootsuite, Sprout Social. I didn't include those because they are a lot more money to start out with, and especially if you aren't comfortable with social media and automating your schedules, it's going to be I don't necessarily suggest that someone delves right in with something that's going to cost you hundreds of dollars a month if you aren't comfortable with it. Get comfortable with it, then make the decision based on the features that you need and whatever other considerations you have. Things like what platforms are offered. Not all content schedulers have all the platforms. Instagram, especially, and Twitter, for some reason, because of the way their API is set up, it's a little bit harder. Some of them, the free plan won't include Instagram, and the paid ones will. What analytics do you need? We're going to talk about analytics in a little bit. How many people will be using it? If you have a bigger team or you have multiple people, you want to know who's doing what. That's a consideration. Knowing if it integrates with existing tools. Some of these are built, they connect right from Canva. So you can go from Canva and press one button and schedule it to post. Does it offer features that mesh well with the content you create? Captions, some of these automatically will generate captions on videos, include tags. So you can have a list of other creators or accounts or hashtags that you want to pull from constantly, and you can have a repository of those that you use frequently. These are all very different. I suggest looking at these, looking at other options to see what fits your needs the best. But all of these allow you to create something, schedule it, and then you don't have to dedicate time every single day to posting. I'm a big fan, again, of automating your engagements. So automating engagements where you take 10 to 15 minutes in the day, you pull up all of the lists of creators or accounts that you follow, you skim them. If something works, you engage with it. That's it. If you have to do it all manually, open everything up one by one, going through your post feed. Remember that the post feed, the algorithm is set up to keep you posting. It's not set up to keep you productive. You're supposed to keep scrolling for infinity. If you want to be productive, you're going to have to think outside the box with that. So when we automate engagements, there's two sections that we want to look at. One, engaging in general, with our users, with people who are competition, with potential audiences, but also we want to make sure that we're connecting with those annex audience creators, using keyword search terms with some of those intangible interests that we talked about earlier, searching hashtags, knowing what accounts does our core user base follow, research forums that are based around those intangibles. Think about who is leading the discussion about these concepts. One of the things that I like to do is go to Patreon and looking up interest in audiences and seeing what creators are there that people are actively love so much that they're giving money to voluntarily. Then you say, hey, this is an important voice. What are they talking about? Who are they following? It's just a bunch of rabbit trails that you're going to follow and keep just adding to your repertoire. Now, you can also look at what's trending on the platforms themselves. Here I have links not just to the platforms, but specific pages on the platforms where you can see what's trending on TikTok, on Google, Instagram. There's also a site called Exploding Trends that looks in general across the internet as a whole, including all the social media platforms and many forums, also the Twitter trending page. So you can get a general idea of what the topic of the day is, what things are just what people are discussing. And so if you want to utilize your 20% off the cuff content, you can do that then. As for how to automate, you can automate searches on Google. Essentially, you create a search and then you bookmark it. And then you just have to open that bookmark and the search will update based on the day's information. You can also open multiple accounts or tags at once. Get Toby is one of my favorite Chrome extensions in history. I use it all the time for all kinds of things. I linked a tutorial on that, as well as this is a link to the product itself, and they have their own video that shows you how it works. Also Google Sheets, this is a video that shows you how you can open multiple links at a time in Google Sheets. So essentially what you want to do is have all of your accounts that you want to follow bunched together, open them at once so you can very easily see, is this relevant? Yes, engage. Is this relevant? No, close. And you can move through it. I can go through over 100 accounts in less than 15 minutes. and engage with them all actively. So it's about setting up your process so that this is not infringing in your day-to-day time of running your business. So reporting, we want to make sure that if we're putting all this time and effort into something, we know if it's working. And before we do that, we have to understand how we're going to measure the success. We can measure the success on the platform, or we can measure it in the outcomes of our site. So something that's site specific. So on a platform, are we looking for views? Are we looking for engagements in general? Or are we looking for something specific like likes or follows or comments or shares? When we're talking about our website, are we looking for clicks on something particular? Are we looking for visits, sales, signups, someone becoming a lead, filling out a form, downloading a white paper that we created? We have to be very clear about what we want that one piece of content to accomplish, because you have to focus. You get one goal. Really frequently, we try to do too much at once. We focus on min-maxing, getting every single bit of information wrung out of every single piece of content, but we don't have a full grasp of the fundamentals yet. People like to talk about UTMs, unique tracking metrics, source or campaign tracking, analytics. It can get really complicated really fast, but you still don't necessarily know if it's working or not. That's why they talk about with A/B testing, you change one thing. You don't change a whole bunch of things, because then you don't know what the push was to make it work. So when we're talking about social media, we want to make sure we have one goal. Are we establishing expertise with this? Are we trying to get people to visit our site? Are we just trying to get people to follow us? Are we trying to get people to check in with us more frequently, or share our content with others? Pick one thing. You get one. Consider the environment. When COVID happened, obviously that shifted the way that a lot of businesses worked. It shifted the way that social media worked. I mean, one of the reasons that Zoom exploded the way that it did was in no small part to COVID and how easy it was to access. If Zoom compared its numbers today to its numbers during the height of COVID, it might technically be better in terms of overall numbers, but in terms of growth, it's much, much slower. So they have to make sure that they're considering the environment. And the same thing, especially now, we're going into the Christmas season. If you're in any sort of retail or e-commerce, you are going to be considering that environment, which is going to be very different than the environment any other time of the year, which is another reason why we look at year over year, not month to month. Obviously, any sort of upward trajectory is good, but there are always other things that are happening in the world around us. Or if we want to compare apples to apples, we have to go year over year to see if something is growing or declining versus month to month, because there's too many variables. And when we're looking at results, we want to make sure that we have very clear, singular goals. So in review, we want to make sure that you understand your user, you take advantage of annexed audiences and interest, that your platform appropriate, consistency is key, always provide value, the 2-80-20 rules, 80% of what you do is for users, 20% is what users do for you, 80% planned content, 20% spontaneous content, automate where possible, and set simple goals. And with that, we are going to open the floor for Q&A.
Yeah, there's a relatively new one. When Anita had a question there for you.
Let's see. I'm going through the list. Courtney asked, what is SEO? SEO stands for search engine optimization, and it's essentially how you create your website or online presence so that you get higher rankings in search engines. There's a lot of tips and tricks. We actually have an introductory course to SEO that our SCORE chapter put out that I led that has a lot more information about SEO. Ted, I don't know if that one is up on YouTube yet, but we can definitely get a link to you if you're interested.
Yeah, I can go ahead and put that, attach that as a link in the email that I send out tomorrow.
Excellent. Dana, creating bulk content seems like a lot. Once you get a system, I mean, like anything new, it's going to take you a while to figure out what works for you. I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't. But also, like I said, consistency is key. It doesn't have to be about frequency. It just has to be about consistency. There are so many ads and other accounts and algorithms that get modified so that people never see the content we create. So what you have to do is make sure the content you create is impactful enough for people to go out of their way to find it. And that's why, you know, we talk about providing value, because if you're providing someone value, they're going to seek you out. Creating bulk content, it doesn't have to be super complicated. You can basically come up with a concept. If you could tell me what type of product that you have or what your industry is, and maybe I can help you a little bit more with that, something more specific. But, you know, there's a lot of things where you can just create what they call evergreen content, where, you know, you're constantly reposting it in a new and fresh way, so that people, you know, can get more use out of it. I used to work with a moving company that would always have checklists for things that you need to move. They had one for college students moving in and out of the dorms. They would have one for people who were moving up and switching houses, moving out of an apartment into a house, downsizing from a house to a patio home. All these checklists were essentially the same thing. They would just tweak it for the season or for whatever was happening at that moment. And basically it's one piece of content that they got tens of thousands of impressions and engagements and downloads from. So you can utilize bulk content in a way that looks like you did a lot of work, but in reality, you didn't do very much work. You just repurposed it a lot. So I'll come back to that in a second. How you use Google Sheets to automate engagement with users. So in the resources, I have this thing, the content dashboard, which all of you can click on and get access to and download a copy for yourself. But essentially, it is a spreadsheet where you can track your own content as well as track accounts and platforms that you want to follow. And then what you do, and there's a link above in the automation section, but essentially if you highlight all the cells that have links in them and you right click and click open links, it will open all of them in individual tabs. And so what I'll do with that is, if I have a list, if I want to, because they are also broken down by categories, I can sort them and filter them by category. So if I only want to look at a certain category, I just highlight those and then I open them. So if I don't necessarily want to do the entire list at once, I say, okay, we're going to go through this section. And then when I get a break, I'll go through this section and I can really parse that out and be really efficient with my use of my time. But yeah, once you have a bunch of different tabs open, instead of having to scroll through a feed, you can be really quick and really effective in understanding what you need and what you don't need. Because if you're doing this every day or every week, there's not going to be that much content for you to go through. There's going to be like 1 or 2 posts. Okay, I did it, done. And you'll be able to move forward through that really, really quickly. What do you think about unposting content and editing it better than reposting it? I've been doing that with a podcast because I feel it can be better. I am someone who is always editing whatever I've posted. Until I post the next thing, I will constantly be editing it. I'll be sitting on the couch and think, oh, this phrasing would be better. Or I'll recognize a typo that I didn't notice, or the other 2 people that I had proofread it didn't notice. The thing is, the way the algorithms work, older content, depending on what platform you're on, sometimes they say older content gets more, it gets a firmer authority. But what will happen, especially on social media platforms like LinkedIn, if you post it, they weigh the initial response within a very short time frame heavier. So, if you get 10 likes over the course of a day, fine, whatever. If you get 10 likes within the course of the first 5 minutes, all of a sudden LinkedIn is going to artificially boost that post because they think that it's something that's going to get a lot of engagement. Now, where you can get into trouble is I've seen people where they'll post something, 10 minutes later, it's not getting the traction they want, they remove it, and then they post it again. I know that's not what you're saying you're doing, but sometimes it can look that way, and you can get penalized on the platforms for that. So that's something to be aware of. There's no shame in building on something you've already posted. If you post a concept or an article and you're like, you know what, I think it can be better, talk about it the next day. I was really important for me to share this with you, but I've been able to think about it, and this is something that I wish I had thought to include. So now you have 2 pieces of content out of 1 piece. Any training videos on the annex searching what's trending? Can this be done for a specific area like travel? Yes. So the annex thing, like I was telling Ted earlier, this is something that I came up with that has been working really well for me with social media and audiences in general, being able to be exposed to new circles. But there isn't any training media on it right now. If people are interested, I'm sure I can put something together. But essentially, it's knowing your users, knowing what their interests are, and then just following that down logically. Using the linking Venn diagrams where it's kind of like a reverse, I find is really helpful, because you start with something, who else cares about this? Oh, these people. Well, what do they care about that my clients also care about? Oh, this. So that's the interest. And now what is that interest again? And just following that down the path. And typically once you do that, you can get a pretty broad selection of audiences and interests that you can then start to look up and pursue and engage with. So Dana, that is fantastic. Menstrual underwear and feminine hygiene products. It's something that a lot of people don't talk about, because of our society and the shame that's attached to it. But also think about what people are buying. They're buying freedom to not have to think about all of the things that we've traditionally had to think about. There's a lot of competitors out there that have really great advertising, but when I remember when those products first came out, they were seen, as most things are in this space, as kind of like crunchy. But now it's something that professional women are utilizing because they're too busy to take time for all this other stuff. They don't want to have to think about their periods. And so looking at those interests and saying, all right, what do these people have in common? Let's follow business women forums and see what they're talking about. And let's talk about how my product can, help that. What are their concerns, not just in dealing with their periods, but what are their concerns about, just hygiene while traveling? What can we break? Can we give them a list of things that can reduce the size of their packing, reduce the size of their suitcase when they're traveling by utilizing all of these other products, and of course, including ours in the list. There's a lot of different annexing that you can do with that. What are more specific tools on Google Business that can make your website more prominent? Would you recommend having your audience engage with Google reviews more? Other tips? This is again covered a lot in the SEO course that Ted's going to include. But Google loves anything that you use that has to do with Google. Anything that you post on YouTube, anything that you put on the Google My Business posts or interactions, putting photos up on your Google My Business, asking people to post reviews on Google My Business. They have a lot of different options and specialties. You can put your goods and services on Google. They don't call it Google My Business, it's Google Business Profiles now. But you could break down every single product and service that you offer on there, and you can create links and pricing, and all of that can be handled within that little Google structure. Google loves that, and that will really help engage with your SEO for your website if you link back to it. But also, Google's goal is to get people to never leave Google. That's why if you search for a company, lots of times you won't even see the company until towards the bottom of the page, because before that you're going to get their business listing, or they're going to get their map location or something like that. If you search for things, near me, you're going to get the map, and you're not going to get the list of businesses. You might get like list of Yelp pages for that area and that content, but you're not going to get the actual businesses. So what you have to do is you have to work within the Google infrastructure to set a footprint, and also, make sure that you're following best practices for your website itself, which again, we talk about in the SEO workshop. Sorry, Courtney, what was what called? I'm so sorry. And Christopher, thank you for calling out Metricool. I will see about getting that added. I know that there's a lot of them out there that do have free versions. There's always new versions coming out. I know One Up was something that I found through Reddit. Definitely do your due diligence when you're looking at these. Make sure that it suits your needs. A lot of them, even paid things, offer a free 14-day trial. Make sure that it's going to work for you. Evergreen content. So yes, evergreen content is something that you can always use. It can always come up. You can use it for almost every situation. It is not necessarily tied to a campaign. It's not tied to an event. It's not tied to a specific product. It's something that you could always bring up and always utilize, and it lasts forever. Another thing that we didn't necessarily talk about here is taking content and wringing out every little piece of smaller content that you can. Something that I suggest to people is sitting down with either video camera or microphone and talking to somebody about your business. It doesn't necessarily have to be a formal interview, but what do you love about your business? Who does it help? And having someone ask you follow-up questions, and you are talking passionately about your business because that's what you feel about it. That's what you care about it. And then you have a bunch of video and audio content that you can chop up and post on social media. You can also take your audio content and have captions layered on top of it. That's great for like when you're scrolling, you see images. Moving text is always going to make people slow down and stop and read it before they decide to scroll on. You can take a 10-minute video and you can create 20 pieces of content from it. You mentioned this reason for why you got into the business. Let's delve further into that. Let's talk about the story that brought you here. Let's talk about your user stories and why they love your products. It's, not just about a review. It's about how it solved their need, and people want to see themselves in other people. That's frequently what we're looking for. Is we're looking for people like us, people who make us feel seen and heard. And so sharing stories that someone says, oh, that's like me, they understand me, it's already lowering the barrier for them to purchase your good or service because they feel like you already get them. And so they're more aligned with you and they want to purchase from you.
Yeah, Ange, let me ask you a question. I might have missed it because I had to be away from my computer for a few minutes, but have you mentioned the usage of artificial intelligence in creating multiple days of content for individuals, for businesses to post on their social media platforms?
I have not. So AI is really interesting because it's not true artificial intelligence, it's machine learning. So it's not really good at creating things from scratch, but it is good at giving us starting points. So what you can do, especially if you pay for the $20 a month version of ChatGPT-4, you can ask it to look at searches or concepts and say, okay, what is something popular that's being requested for this and that there's no articles on? Or okay, this is something that people have an interest in. Could you tell me audiences that overlap with this interest? So there you go. There's your annexing audiences. I don't like AI for fully creating content. Again, only because it's not super good at it. I know a lot of people say, oh, I made this piece of content and it went super viral and nobody knew that AI wrote it. Especially when you're talking about short form content, you don't have a lot of opportunity to make an impact. And so what you do make has to be authentic. I think that ChatGPT and AI is great for starting points. It's great for essentially filtering through a lot of noise to give you a starting point. But outside of that, I wouldn't necessarily utilize it to create content. I wouldn't say, give me an article of 500 words on this thing. Again, that's just for me. I think coming up with concepts, it's great, because I feel that a lot of people, what stops them from moving forward is not knowing how to take one step. And what AI does is it helps basically give us options to take that first step. It shows us where to go. It gives us, head start. And then once we have that, something we can grab onto, it's usually not that hard. It's the taking the first step that's difficult, and AI helps address that and stop that as an excuse for not creating.
Well, AI is certainly being the talk of the nation, and it is something that we are going to be living with, continuing to live with. So it might be something that our audience might want to look at for at least, like you say, beginning to create content.
Play with prompts. AI is only as good as the prompt that you give it.
Right.
Playing with that, something that I like to do frequently is I will give it a concept and then I will say, rewrite this in the voice of insert person here. Rewrite this in the voice of a famous marketing guru, or rewrite this in the voice of John Goodman. Rewrite this in a friendly voice and an authoritative voice. See how it shifts and see what level you feel represents your brand more. And then once you have that, you can put stuff in that, if you just have general concepts and you have a beginning, you have an end, you don't necessarily know what you want in the middle. You could tell it, please read this opening paragraph and then read the secondary paragraph. Do not create anything yet. Tell me that you understand. And then it will read it and it will say, I understand. Like, okay, utilizing those paragraphs as the first and end, please create a 300-word paragraph to go in between that connects these two concepts in a understandable format, in an understandable natural format, and then see what it comes up with. I'm not saying use it, just copy and paste it, but usually it will help you get from point A to point B. It's very difficult for AI to create things, but it's very good at helping us notice things that we typically don't pay attention to. Oh, you hit your toe. Oh, no.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions within the chat. Is there anyone else that has a comment or a question? The floor is still open. Well, doesn't look like it. So at this point, I will say thank you very much, Ange, for the presentation. I will be getting out the link to tonight's presentation, to the Zoom presentation. That'll be sent to you tomorrow, along with a PDF copy of the slides. And we also added that I'm going to also indicate in my email to the attendees that there's a recording that I'll also include the link to the recording on SEO. Did I miss anything else?
Nope. Some people are asking if there's a way to follow me. You can follow me on LinkedIn Ang Jandak. I think it's linkedin.com/in/ang-jandak, which I don't have my browser up, so I can't paste that right now. But it's a cool thing about having a weird last name. It's really easy to find me in places. So, thank you. You have been wonderful and asked a lot of really great questions. If you want, you can always email me at angela.jandak@scorevolunteer.org. And I will do my best to help you and answer any questions possible.
And I'll include that that address also within the email that goes out to the attendees tomorrow. Thank you, attendees, for being with us tonight. And I wish everyone a great evening. Don't forget about the Starting and Managing Your Own Business workshop that is on Saturday, December the 2nd. And if you're interested in that, please go to the buffaloniagara.score.org website. You can register there for that particular in-person all-day event. So thanks again, and I wish everyone a good evening.